After Cardinal Rohan, Almoner of France, returned from Vienna, he lost brownie points with Marie Antoinette because of his promiscuous behavior. Rohan had been sent to Austria as an ambassador, but he'd made an idiot of himself. Despite being a churchman, he wasn't really interested in religion at all. He preferred high living and scandalous company. This had angered Marie Antoinette's mother, the Empress Maria Theresa. As a result of letters from her mother, Marie Antoinette cut Rohan from her inner circle. Desperate to get back in her good books, the cardinal turned to one of his lovers for help, the Countess of La Motte. Sadly for him and the rest of France, this countess wasn't what she seemed. La Motte told Rohan that she was friendly with the queen and promised to help restore his position at court. She began passing letters from Rohan to Marie Antoinette, which the queen answered. In fact, her responses were so warm that Rohan fell in love with her and came to believe she returned his love. La Motte arranged for Rohan to secretly meet with the queen one night outside the palace of Versailles. It was so dark that Rohan couldn't see her face, but that didn't matter. He gave Marie Antoinette a rose and she officially forgave him for his bad behavior. Cardinal Rohan was overjoyed. Not only was he back on top of society, he also had the secret confidence, maybe even the affection of the queen herself. So naturally, it made sense to Rohan when La Motte gave him another letter from Marie Antoinette. This time, she asked him to do her a favor. A big favor that would cost millions of dollars, destroy the hated queen's reputation, and ultimately lead to her death. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before she was the Queen of France, Marie Antoinette was Archduchess Maria Antonia, born in Vienna on November 2nd, 1755. The 15th, yes, the 15th, of Empress Maria Theresa and Emperor Francis I. Maria Theresa was one of the toughest women to ever live. She ran the Austrian Empire with an iron fist, despite the fact she was constantly pregnant. Supposedly, she even worked while giving birth, consulting with her ministers and signing state papers. Francis, on the other hand, was a warm, casual man who preferred to be what we call today a stay-at-home dad. Young Marie Antoinette grew up loving her father and fearing her mother. Tragically, Francis died when Marie was only 10 years old. Marie grew up in Schönbrunn Palace, surrounded by music, dancing, and royal etiquette. In fact, she met another famous musical lover by the name of Mozart when he came to play for the imperial family at the tender age of 6. As a younger daughter of a huge royal family, Marie was basically ignored by her mother. No one ever dreamed she would marry anyone particularly important. This had tragic consequences. Marie's education was focused on music, culture, and deportment. She was trained to be some nobleman's wife, not the ruler of a nation. However, an epidemic would change all that. In 1767, smallpox ravaged the royal family. Marie's sister Josepha died. Another sister, Joanna, survived, but she was left with a scarred face for the rest of her life. As a result, she was deemed too ugly to marry. Suddenly, when it came time to make a marriage alliance with France, Marie Antoinette was the only daughter available. In 1770, at just 14, she was sent to France to marry Prince Louis Auguste, the future Louis XVI. It was a marriage meant to warm relations between Austria and France, two countries that traditionally hated each other. Romantic, right? The lavish wedding at the Palace of Versailles was met with public enthusiasm. The French people were captivated by their young, graceful princess, hopeful that this union would bring prosperity and stability. Right off the bat, there were major red flags. Marie felt like a prisoner at the Palace of Versailles. The French court was full of crazy rules and privacy was impossible. The nobles who lived there had a strict pecking order and bickered over who had the right to do things like hand Marie her wig, put on her dress, or empty her chamber pot. Life at Versailles was a never-ending performance, and Marie was thrust into a leading role completely unprepared. It was nothing like the relatively normal life she'd led in Vienna. Then there was her husband. Louis was, let's say, not the most exciting guy. He was shy, loved hunting, and was obsessed with locks, like actual locks that you open with keys. Meanwhile, Marie was all about fun, fashion, and fancy pastries. It took them 7 years to consummate the marriage. There have always been theories as to why. Some of these include Louis having a physical deformity or strong religious beliefs. It may also have been that the two had no chemistry and weren't attracted to each other. Whatever the case, Maria Theresa constantly sent her daughter letters demanding that she start having sex, which is awkward, and it didn't work. So Maria Theresa did something even more intrusive and drastic. She actually sent her son, Marie's brother, to have a talk with Louis. Imagine your mom sending your brother to beg your partner to sleep with you. Apparently it worked, because Marie finally gave birth to a daughter in 1778. Because it took so long for her to finally fall pregnant, many people believed that the child was illegitimate. This then led to Marie having to give birth in public, just to prove that the child was legitimate. Meanwhile, there is speculation that Marie had an affair with Axel von Fersen, a Swedish count. The two met at a masked ball at Versailles in 1774. He made quite an impression because the next time their paths crossed, she greeted him as old friend. However, there was no solid evidence that they ever had an affair. So what was it that fueled these rumors? Well, for starters, there were letters. In one of them, the Count declared, "I love you and will love you madly all my life." He also wrote in a letter to his sister, "I have decided never to marry. It would be unnatural. I cannot belong to the one person I truly want, so I prefer to belong to nobody." The two of them also made use of code names and secret addresses, further fueling rumors. Also in 1774, Louis's grandfather died and he became the King of France. As queen, Marie quickly became the trendsetter of Versailles, the it girl, if you will. Her fashion, extravagant, her hair, ridiculously high, like you could hide a small bird in it high. In fact, sometimes she did. Her wigs were decorated with miniature ships, gardens, and even scenes from plays. Her fondness for gambling and extravagant entertainment earned her both admiration and criticism. Because she was such a lover of spending, Louis XVI had to eventually cut her off. One of her expenses included hiring her own personal chocolatier. She loved drinking chocolate almost as much as she loved spending. Despite these luxuries, Marie despised the pageantry and politics of Versailles, where all the nobles of France intrigued and defrauded each other and took turns seducing each other's wives. Marie took to spending more time in a secluded chateau within the palace grounds called Petit Trianon, seeking refuge from the rigid etiquette of Versailles. There, she hosted intimate gatherings and embraced a simpler lifestyle, often dressing in simple muslin gowns inspired by English fashion. Marie never seemed to sense that her lavish spending and perceived aloofness were making her dangerously unpopular. She continued to construct a fantasy world in order to escape from her unhappy life at court. At great expense, Marie constructed a mock village for herself, known as the Amont de la Reine, or the Queen's Hamlet, complete with a working farm, artificial lake, and watermill. Essentially an oversized playground for Marie Antoinette and her friends. Meanwhile, France's real villages and towns were starving. The Flour War of 1775, spurred by soaring bread prices, highlighted the growing unrest among the population. Many began to view the Queen as indifferent to their suffering, a symbol of all that was wrong with France. Marie became the face of the hated elite, living in their own little world while the real people suffered. Satirists began releasing pamphlets depicting her as a cruel and vicious monster. They were usually centered around her allegedly committing some deviant sexual act with various partners. These pamphlets had the goal of portraying her as a bad wife and mother driven by lust. They simultaneously portrayed Louis as an impotent cuckold. The pamphleteers went so far as to depict the queen seducing her own 8-year-old son. These accusations were obviously false, but the extravagant, party-loving queen made an easy target. France's troubles weren't her fault, but public perception is a powerful thing. The pamphlets combined salacious artwork with revolutionary politics. For the queen and her family, it was a fatal mixture. In 1789, the French Revolution erupted. Peasants stormed the Bastille, the prison fortress that physically embodied the power of the king. They were filled with rage, and the person they hated most was their expensive foreign queen. In October, 3 months after the storming of the Bastille, the royal couple attempted to flee but were caught at Versailles and brought to France, where they were effectively placed under house arrest at the Palace of Tuileries. And you won't believe how they were caught. Someone recognized Louis XVI's face from a coin. That's right, the king was busted because of his own money. Here, the king was forced into negotiating terms for a constitutional monarchy, which would greatly limit his powers. With her husband weighed down by stress, Marie Antoinette secretly sought help. Assisted by Count Fersen, remember him? Marie Antoinette hatched a plan in 1791 to flee with her family to Normandy, where they would initiate a counter-revolution. Unfortunately, they were discovered near the town of Varennes and taken back to the Tuileries, humiliated. In April 1792, France declared war on Austria, fearing its troops would launch an invasion to restore the monarchy. However, the French defeated the Austrian family at the Battle of Valmy in September. The French Republic was born, and the monarchy was formally abolished. By this point, the king and queen were already imprisoned, along with a few of their confidants. Among them was Marie Antoinette's close friend, the Princess de Lamballe, who was thrown into the notorious La Force prison. Having refused to swear an oath against the royal family, Lamballe was dragged out into the street on the 3rd of September 1792, where she was attacked by a mob and decapitated. In 1793, following the execution of Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette faced her own trial. It's a mark of how seriously people took the propaganda against her that she was actually accused to her face of sleeping with her own son. The queen refused even to answer the charge. Marie Antoinette was convicted of high treason, extravagant spending, and even conspiring with Austria. She was guillotined on October 16, 1793. Wearing a simple white dress, her famous wigs long gone, she walked solemnly to the block. On the way, she accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot, and ever the lady, her last words were, "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose." Talk about grace under pressure. Her body was initially dumped in an unmarked grave, but was later exhumed and placed in a tomb next to her husband. But her story isn't quite over yet. In the opening, we talked about Cardinal Rohan and his exchange of letters with who he believed to be Marie Antoinette. In her final letter, she asked him to purchase an extravagant necklace on her behalf. Urged on by his mistress, Countess Lamont, Rohan took the letter to the jewelers and told them he was authorized to buy the necklace on the Queen's authority. The Queen would pay them later. After Rohan acquired the necklace, the Countess stole it and mysteriously disappeared. The piece in question, by the way, was worth the equivalent of about $18 million today. Not long after, the jewelers went to Marie asking to be paid. The Queen had no idea what they were talking about. She had never wanted the necklace and in fact had refused to purchase it several times because it was too expensive. Rohan was arrested and it soon emerged he'd been duped. Countess Lamont, who was in fact an impostor and a fraud, was soon found and arrested. She was convicted and branded with the letter V for voleuse, or thief. Very scarlet letter of them. Even though Marie technically had nothing to do with the crime, she was blamed for it. The public didn't understand the scandal, but they knew their queen was lavish. They assumed it was a scam on her part and blamed her. The so-called affair of the diamond necklace was one of the incidents that destroyed Marie's reputation forever, leading to her downfall and ultimately her death. In death, her legend has only grown. What do you think of her? Was she a villain, a victim, or just a woman caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to History Snob for more cool historical content. Thanks for watching.